Our Hill Watchers are here to take the pulse of trade and investment across the border. Joining me from Washington, D.C., Chris Sands of the Hudson Institute, and from Kitchener, we have Besma Momeni from the Center for International Governance. Welcome to you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, Chris, I want to go to you first. Everything seems a little strained right now between the two, even though, Obama and Harper seem to have smiley faces. Is this a real trade rift, or do you think this is just everyone playing politics?
Well, I think it's really everyone playing politics. The president's re-election numbers don't look as good as they did even 6 months ago. He needs to play to his base, and he hopes that by doing so, he'll be able to bring in some more campaign contributions by way of environmental groups who are out raising money on the Keystone Pipeline every day today, and will continue now for another 12 months. Then when the dust is settled, I think this president or his successor, if he doesn't win re-election, will approve the pipeline and will be delayed by a year, but we will proceed.
Is that your view, Besma?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's not forget, this oil is not going anywhere in the sense, it will be pumped out and it will find a very happy consumer. I mean, more importantly, I think, the Kodak moment that we all saw was this great picture and image of the two, flinging their jackets on their shoulders. That was really supposed to reassure all of us that there isn't a rift going on. I don't think there's anything personal here. I mean, the reality is Barack Obama has a very tough fight against his who knows, Republican candidate, and he's playing to his base. And I think we just have to sit back and remember it's not personal.
Well, let me stick with you for a second there, Besma. I'm curious what the fate of the continental perimeter is. It seems to be stalled. The Prime Minister seemed to think it was going to be in late summer. Now it's in December, maybe, subject to the negotiations finish. Is it going to be another victim of U.S. presidential politics? In other words, do nothing until after the vote?
I think we have to, be ready for that. I mean, that's just the reality of the fact that this really is a very tight race for Barack Obama, and no matter what, he has other interests and other concerns, and we're secondary to that. So I think, Canada has to not take this personal. I mean, I know I'm reiterating the point, but we really are, in fact, looking for so much, evidence of problems in a relationship where there aren't any problems. Let's just let the dust settle, as Chris has mentioned, and I think we'll see a resumption of really good economic relations as soon as this all finishes.
So, Chris, we're going to be a pretty small blip on the U.S. radar screen for at least another year. Is that what your sense is?
Well, I think that the Beyond the Border Working Group could actually release its agenda, which ultimately won't be what they've achieved, but what they hope to achieve. And I think that would be helpful. If we all knew what was going to be discussed, we'd have a better sense of whether that would be a potential win for Canada. And while it's true that the big political stuff is going to be hard to move during an election campaign, a lot of the work behind the scenes can be done now. And whether we have a second Obama administration or a Republican administration to follow, the spade work done now can prepare the way for real progress in 2013. And that shouldn't be forgotten. You have to do all the hard work below the radar. Something I'd also suggest is that it's... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Something I'd also suggest is in a bigger picture way, I think we need to find a way to take infrastructure projects out of the politics of day-to-day domestic fighting. We have the Keystone Pipeline on the one side. Over in Michigan, we've got the fight over the Detroit-Windsor crossing that's tied up in the Michigan legislature and doesn't seem to be going anywhere. We have big issues that have to do with the underpinning of our trade. They're not about our trade per se, but they're about facilitating it. And it seems like on these projects, it's very hard for Canada, despite making a case that it's in the U.S. interest, to get U.S. politicians to carry it forward. So what I'd love to see is us take the politics out of this and begin having a more rational debate about infrastructure development that isn't so hostage to the vagaries of the electoral cycle.
Besma, what do you do, though, when the result of that election is so uncertain? Do you start making overtures to the Republicans just as sort of a backstop in case things go south for President Obama, or do you just play it straight with the Democrats and hope for the best?
Well, I don't think you want to really start, assuming one side or the other is going to be the victor here. More importantly, I think what Chris pointed out, that there's some really strong linkages already between working groups, and trying to get some of these real technical issues ironed out is the really positive way to go, and to not only ensure that the agenda is transparent, but also to keep humming along on the agenda is really key. I think that ultimately 2012 is around the corner. We know it's going to be tough. We may not see a lot of the kind of warm visits that we've seen in the past, although clearly Harper's return to Washington is I think more for our consumption than anybody else's, to reassure us that there isn't a problem. But at the end of the day, he's got a lot on his plate. Barack Obama will be on the campaign trail. I think increasingly after some Republican nominee comes out of the woodwork and finally lets it be known who will take the helm. At the end of the day, I think what we need to do is just be patient, allow the technocrats to keep working on it. I appreciate, Chris's really good point of having the agenda transparent as possible. And ultimately, we know that we are very good trading partners. That's not going to end regardless of either personalities or governments in place. That's not going to change the reality of us being a very strong trading partner with the United States.
Chris, I was struck by watching the video footage of the Prime Minister and the President in Honolulu, and they sure looked like buddy-buddy. Was that just for the cameras, or do you think there really is a pretty decent relationship between these two leaders?
No, I think it's actually genuine. Both are fairly cerebral politicians who are often said to not have necessarily the common touch, but are wonkish and meritocratic and pay attention to details. So I think they do click fairly well. The other thing is that I think Prime Minister Harper's made an extra effort on the assumption that perhaps the Obama administration would come into office in 2009 with some lingering suspicions of a conservative politician north of the border. You remember the issue over the NAFTA, whether Obama was sincere when he said that he was open to renegotiating it or not. All of that had come out during the election. So I think Harper made it work. That wasn't necessarily the obvious or the easy thing for him to do, but he's really made it work, and he has a good personal bond here. And one thing that I think Harper has that a lot of the Canadian officials and a lot of what we've heard in the last 24 hours has not had is a confidence about the U.S. I don't think he feels that if he gets a setback in the relationship, it's the end of the relationship. But for a lot of people, they see something like the Keystone Pipeline and their immediate thought is, what did we do wrong? How is Canada to blame? I don't think Canada is to blame here, and I think Harper instinctively knows that, so he doesn't come to Obama with recriminations. He just wants to say, okay, this didn't work. How do we get back on track?
Okay, Besma, final question to you. What does Mr. Harper go to Washington with his agenda? What's on his agenda when he gets to the White House?
Well, I mean, I think that, obviously the Keystone Project is going to be high on the agenda. And again, that's partly more for, again, domestic consumption here, because I think a lot of this is really out of Obama's hands right now as things kind of muddle through there. But I think continuing to talk about trade is the way to go. Clearly, there are a lot of other security items on the agenda that Obama will want to talk about, particularly Iran. I mean, a lot of Middle East issues, for example, they agree on a lot of key points there. So there's a lot of foreign policy commonality that I think that they'll probably want to focus on in terms of making sure there's a positive and coordinated message. And the Keystone Project will be in the background, but I think both politicians, as Chris pointed out, are quite level-headed and recognize that this is really not anything personal. It's just reality of their own domestic politics, and eventually, good relations will continue.
Good. Okay, Besma Momeni and Chris Sands, thank you both for joining us.